His symptoms started 7 years ago.
New science helps doctors diagnose Alzheimer's before you see symptoms.
I have a family history of Alzheimer's. My grandmother had it, my dad had it, I have it.
With knowledge comes hope.
If we get the test, that's just one more piece of knowledge to have about this.
As his symptoms progress.
He's looking around, okay, where would this go?
Remembering that I can't remember things is annoying.
Plus, what we know about slowing disease progression and caring for caregivers.
It's okay to not feel okay. It's okay to feel like the walls are crushing in on you, but there is help out there.
Welcome to Choices, Hope, and Science. I'm Jessica Lovell, and we are joining you from the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio. Most of us have struggled to remember something. The more you forget, though, the more concerning it becomes. Memory loss is the first noticeable sign of Alzheimer's, yet the disease begins long before symptoms present. How do you diagnose before symptoms? Angie Riccono spoke with one couple ready for some clarity, and it all starts with a blood test.
I'm not sure I want you walking around the neighborhood unless you have your phone with you and I can keep track of where you're going.
I know where I am. May not be able to tell you, but I'll know.
Brian Janes is 64. He's been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment and recently Alzheimer's.
I have a family history of Alzheimer's. My grandmother had it, my dad had it, I have it, and I guess if there's something we can learn that would help somebody down the road, that's worth a lot to me.
Brian's diagnosis is currently based off of his symptoms, which have worsened over time.
About a year ago, it was my mom's 90th birthday, and we had a lot of family here, and great time. And I was talking about it the next day, and he said, was I there? It's like, yes, but he didn't remember.
Brian plans to take a newer blood test that detects elevated levels of proteins that characterize Alzheimer's disease. Here's why an accurate diagnosis is important. Alzheimer's is a brain disease making up 60 to 80% of dementia cases, meaning the rest is something else. A confirmed diagnosis can lead to a more appropriate treatment and understanding for families.
The frustration is big because he knows he can't remember, and he knows he used to be able to.
Yeah, remembering that I can't remember things is annoying.
Brian paints and keeps active. He works with specialists at the University of Kansas Alzheimer's Disease Research Center.
Well, I like trains.
I know.
His family knows there are many aspects of Alzheimer's that remain a mystery.
There are just those moments where nothing's there.
A blood test will be one piece of information.
There's still so much they don't know about Alzheimer's, and any information we can get about his disease, it will be better because they're coming up with so many new things right now, different treatments, and so just getting a little more information.
And we are joined in studio by two neurologists and experts in memory care. Dr. Russell Swerdlow is the director of the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, and Dr. Jeff Burns is the co-director of the Research Center. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. We're also pleased to welcome in Brian and his wife, Gay. They are both joining us from their home today. Gay, what is the biggest thing that has changed for you as Brian's symptoms have progressed?
I am now his short-term memory. He will ask, have we eaten dinner? And I said, yes, we've eaten dinner, which in his mind means he can have ice cream. He'll also ask, have I taken a shower? I need to go take a shower. I said, no, you took one an hour ago. So all the short-term memory is gone, and so I am his short-term memory.
Dr. Burns, could you explain the science behind this blood test?
So I'll start with the idea about this blood test is it's a test that gives us an indication as to the likelihood that somebody has something called amyloid in the brain. And amyloid is something that's associated with Alzheimer's disease. So if we have somebody who has cognitive changes, and you can now use this blood test to detect if they also have amyloid in the brain, then it can give us a really strong clue, one additional big piece of the puzzle to help us understand if somebody has Alzheimer's. And so really the science behind it is we're measuring small proteins, amyloid and tau, in the blood, and we're now we've validated these tests to get to the point where we feel pretty confident, or very confident, that they reflect the likelihood of whether somebody has these microscopic changes in the brain.
So what are the potential benefits of a blood test, maybe compared to a more invasive testing option?
Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits to just drawing blood compared to what we are, sort of our standard today, up till today, I'll say, is an expensive amyloid PET scan, which is a relatively new thing, but very expensive, and often we can't get insurance or Medicare to pay for it. So very expensive amyloid PET scan, or an invasive spinal tap, a lumbar puncture, where we're looking at the spinal fluid for these proteins. These are great ways to measure amyloid and tau, but they're not necessarily always great for the patient, right? So some people might have bleeding problems, don't want to do, or fear of a spinal tap, and then the expense of an amyloid PET scan is something that we'd love to avoid. So a simple blood test really opens up a lot of avenues for moving our diagnostics forward.
Dr. Swerdlow, who should be getting this test? We talk about early treatment, but how do you identify the ideal candidate?
Yeah, the people that we need to confirm or refute whether they have amyloid plaques in their brain, and there could be a number of different reasons for wanting to confirm or refute that. Some people really want to know beyond what we're predicting from our exam and our clinical evaluations of the patient. And now we have to also know if someone may qualify for one of these new medicines that remove plaques from the brain.
Do you think this test will offer hope to families with a history of Alzheimer's?
I hope it will. You've been discussing so far about what people want to know and what people need to know, and but as some of the people on the show have been saying, having knowledge can help, and we want to understand things better.
We had mentioned earlier Brian has that family history, so does that mean that Alzheimer's is hereditary?
Well, Alzheimer's disease is usually not hereditary. It can be in rare instances, but it doesn't mean that genes don't determine someone's lifetime risk. So people who have family members with Alzheimer's disease, they may have genes that may increase their risk of getting Alzheimer's as well, although it doesn't necessarily determine absolutely whether they are going to get it or not during their lifetime.
Dr. Burns, Alzheimer's is often called the long goodbye, as there is no cure. How might this blood test affect the stages of the disease?
Our vision for the future is detect the changes early and then prevent it. And I think we're going to get there someday. I don't know when, but we're well on the road towards that. So the hope is we can use these blood tests to identify risk of people who don't have memory problems someday, not today, just on the research side, but in people who do have memory problems, identify those memory problems really early, and then identify this change of amyloid in the brain and go after it early to slow down the progress of the disease.
Dr. Swerdlow, Brian's wife said that his wife said that the symptoms started about 7 years ago. So what is the difference about memory loss due to Alzheimer's versus normal forgetfulness just due to aging?
Yeah, to some extent it's largely a matter of degree, and the way I think of it is that all of our abilities to remember and work through complex questions changes as we age, but under normal circumstances, we're compensating for everything. We're able to pull it off. And when it becomes a disease is when we're not compensated anymore. We're not pulling it off. And that goes for the level of what we see in the individual and what the individual experiences, and also what's going on in their brains as well. It's really a transition from a compensated state to a decompensated state.
Brian and Gabe, what are you doing now to try and slow the progression of his disease?
We used to eat out quite a bit, and now I'm baking and cooking more at home, so he has more healthy choices. You're exercising?
Yeah.
How much do you exercise?
Well, I lift and carry for a living, so
I know. About at least 10,000 steps a day.
yeah.
Well, there are things that we can do to improve brain health, like good sleep, the Mediterranean diet, social connection, exercise, as you have mentioned. Dr. Burns, can these things really help prevent Alzheimer's?
Yeah, a lot of data points to that. We're working hard. We've been working hard for the last 15 years, really trying to get more specific about that and really prove cause and effect and test things like, if we start somebody like Brian in an exercise program, what's the impact that can have on the brain? And we think it does have an impact. Is it the magic bullet? No. Of course, exercise and diet aren't going to be, and if somebody does everything right, they still might get Alzheimer's disease. If they're destined for it, they will. We think of it as if you're destined for it, and we don't know yet who is and who isn't. If you do everything right and you exercise and you eat right, we can probably push that back a few years in terms of the onset. And if you do everything wrong, you're probably pushing it up a few years. But these are important things because a small change across the population can have a huge impact. If we push the average age of onset back, say 5 years, we can cut the prevalence of Alzheimer's in half across the population. So small changes can have a big impact on a population level, and we think individuals should think hard about making those choices to get 10,000 steps a day and make sure you're walking and eating right and sleeping well, and we think it helps. Yeah.
Dr. Burns, you have spent a lot of time researching the impact of exercise and diet on Alzheimer's. Tell us about LEAP. What does this stand for?
Yeah, so LEAP is a program that we've developed that takes what we're learning and what the field is learning and packages it so people can sort of adapt it in their daily life. We're really trying to take all the latest information and help people put it into action. And so what LEAP stands for is Lifestyle Empowerment for Alzheimer's Prevention. And really trying to take this information and use it to reduce your risk. Big program that we've developed and have a lot of options. We have a book, we have a booklet, and then we have classes that we do online and in person.
Dr. Swerdlow, the FDA has recently approved 2 drugs. How does that science provide hope to your patients?
Well, it's important mostly if it can benefit people. Beyond that, we learn from these experiences where we can manipulate the individual or things that we associate with the disease and see if we can hit this target, does it help the person? So it really helps us learn quite a bit about the disease.
Brian and Gay, new testing options, research studies, new drugs, all of this that we've been talking about leads to more choices in treating Alzheimer's. What does this science mean to you?
Well, my hope is that we can figure out what we can do about it, and also maybe even learn something about how to prevent my kids from following me on this path.
Well, right now there are roughly 11 million Alzheimer's caregivers in America. 70% of those saying coordinating care is stressful and they struggle to find resources to support their own needs. KU Medical Center is helping through the development of text messages that serve as a quick resource for help. Alexis Del Cid explains.
Good morning, sunshine.
My name's Carlos. Charlie Robot.
Charlie! Hey there. Say hi to your fans.
The love and awe that Carlos Olivas III feels for his father is ever present.
We need to get you up so we can get a donut. Mm-hmm. He's that special kind of guy that I call Dad. My hero. His laughter, his humor, his ability to spark a room full of laughter that brings joy and love to the community.
His dad, Carlos Olivas Jr., is a proud U.S. Navy vet, the rock of the family, and a gifted artist. He's also living with Alzheimer's disease.
I have memories of him telling me that, oh, I had this as a dream and this is what I'm going to do. And he would do it. He would create things that he would see in his mind overnight.
What is it? Art.
Art has become one of the love languages Carlos and his dad share together.
Where'd it come from?
My brain, it just peeked out.
This is some of his artwork that comes out of his brain. His mind just wanders and he just processes what he feels at that moment.
Like the millions of others traveling the Alzheimer's road, Carlos knew very little about the disease until one day in 2015 when he got a call from his dad's dentist.
It was a shock when someone says, you are the emergency contact for your dad, and we want to have a conversation with you about his health.
They had noticed a decline in his dad's oral hygiene, a very common symptom when someone is in cognitive decline.
It was enough for them to raise the flag, to give me a call and say, you need to know this.
Shortly after, his dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And roughly a year later, Carlos quit his job in Southern California to move back to his childhood home in Sacramento to care for his father. He was not expecting the isolation that can tear apart families who are navigating an Alzheimer's diagnosis.
The challenges created more isolation between our immediate family.
At a certain point, Carlos realized he couldn't be an effective caregiver without caring for himself. He began joining support groups. Along the way, he also signed up for something called Care Text.
Well, Care Text was a study that included caregivers.
During the trial, Carlos received a text a day giving information on various aspects of caregiving and Alzheimer's disease. He could select certain prompts, guiding him to more information and resources.
It was like someone thinking about me at that time when I'm having a difficult time.
He says the support and guidance at his fingertips was invaluable. And today, Carlos is a man on a mission.
It's okay to feel like the walls are crushing in on you, but there is help out there.
He wants to reach as many people as possible and make help accessible to them.
There's not enough men out there that are out there promoting and spreading awareness of Alzheimer's and related dementia. First time I went into a caregiver support group, no one looked like me, but at the end of the day, I felt so comfortable to be able to be vulnerable.
And through that support, Carlos has discovered an unexpected way to find beauty and joy.
Joy is being taught by my dad how to care for him. Joy is love.
So glad to have Carlos joining us from his home in California. How are you?
I'm awake. It's sunny here in California.
Well, we are so glad to have you. We also want to welcome in Michelle Needens. She is a social worker and the director of the Cognitive Care Network. Michelle, so great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Carlos, you use the word isolating. What is the hardest part of being a caregiver?
I could be in a room full of family and feel like no one knows what is going through with me internally. I feel like no one understands the depths of the emotional roller coaster ride that I go through.
How does the Cognitive Care Network help caregivers prioritize their health?
Well, Carlos did say it well, and that is when you ask about what the hardest part was, it was about feeling alone. So what the Cognitive Care Network really does is make sure people don't feel alone. There is an understanding in this. There is an emotional roller coaster for both the caregiver and the person diagnosed. It happens on both sides. So that's processing that, that's looking at perspective that sometimes blocks folks from taking next steps. It's looking at resources that might be integrated in, and it's supporting through what amounts to sometimes depression, sadness, grief. How do we deal with all of those things?
Well, how common is it for caretakers to experience depression and anxiety?
Very common, in excess of 70%.
Wow.
So we anticipate, the challenge is how do we define grief and where does it cross the line into something that we consider clinical depression? People go back and forth between those two at different junctures in the disease. You kind of settle in, and then something changes, and then you start that process again. So very common.
Carlos, what did you notice the first few months of receiving those texts?
We go through grief and depression, and I feel like I battle that every day. And the text that I would receive kind of helped me out of that, like a rope line, a safety net, so I can lift myself out of those little ruts, those dark spaces, and become a better caregiver for my dad.
Michelle, do the resources you provide change as the patient moves through the stages of the disease?
Yes and no. First and foremost, it's always about perspective. The folks on this call are warriors. They have decided to be warriors, all three of them. And so really jumping into that, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do the best I can, and that includes learning matters, and we affirm that throughout the stages. But certainly there are more direct resources that change over time. Support groups, good for the journey, but there are different helps that are needed at different times through the process.
We want to get to some community questions, and these are the top questions that we get when it comes to Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Swerdlow, Eric wants to know, how important is it to have an outlet for Alzheimer's patients?
Well, I think it's very important. I mean, everyone needs an outlet, and where the challenge comes in is that the opportunities for these outlets may be difficult to find, and I think programs like what Michelle is doing helps to identify what potential outlets are out there, and fortunately there are outlets.
Becca has a question for Dr. Burns. Where do you get the blood test for Alzheimer's?
Yeah, well, that's something we're actually rolling out in the health system. So primary care and specialists will be able to get it in the coming weeks. And it's something that's going to become pretty routine. Now, the important question is who's it right for? Who should be tested? And not everyone. It should be people who have cognitive changes, clear, consistent cognitive changes over time.
Derek has a question for Brian and Gay. How did you tell your family about your diagnosis?
We told our immediate family in person, and then sent out a group chat or a group email to everybody else to explain it all. It's just too much to do all individually.
Dr. Swerdlow, Patty wants to know, is there a general time each stage of Alzheimer's lasts?
It could be a couple of months within a stage, but it could also be a couple of years within a stage. I think the important point I would make is that people don't just switch from one stage to another. They transition through stages, and they reach certain milestones that cause us, the physicians, to say, okay, well, now it's moved from one stage to another. But in some ways, it's an arbitrary designation, and people are constantly passaging through the entire cycle.
Larry's question is for Michelle. How do you approach the fear that comes with an Alzheimer's diagnosis?
So I think it's important to identify what the fear really is, because then we can target the intervention. Let's deal with the worry list. Let's dissolve what is mythical, what is not actual. Let's preemptively tackle what might be fears like, will I have enough money? Do I have enough support? And in that fear and in addressing those fears, we're going to eliminate this big thing that hangs over so many people that says, I'm going to do it alone.
I want to wrap up with some final thoughts. Let's start with Brian and Gay. Brian, what would you like people who are watching to know?
I guess I'd like them to know that it's scarier to carry this around without telling somebody about it.
If you have concerns, get tested. Go to the doctor. Don't wait. There's there's so many different things coming up in all the research right now, and it's not like it was 10 or 20 years ago. So rather than just worry about it, go get tested, go talk to somebody.
Great message. Michelle, what's the final thought? What do you want folks to know?
This is a community situation. This is a family situation. This is a friend situation. You are not only helped by that, but you also are helping by doing that. This is a community project. Let's see it that way.
Carlos, what's your final message for other caregivers?
It's a tough, hard journey, but there's support. There's new advancements of support groups, educational workshops. The research that's coming out of these universities is targeting the patient and the families. There is hope. It's reaching out and finding your circle of care to support you in your journey.
Dr. Swerdlow, final thoughts.
I'm constantly inspired by those who are suffering with this disease, the patients and their families, and I really think together we're going to reach a point where at some point Alzheimer's disease really is going to be in our rearview mirror.
Wouldn't that be nice? Dr. Burns, wrap us up today.
It's a really hopeful time in the fight against Alzheimer's. We have these new diagnostics that are arriving right now, and they're really changing the game. We have new drugs that are helpful, that target new targets, amyloid in the brain, and we have more coming. So it's a really hopeful time. It takes the whole community, and so thank you, Brian and Gay, for being here today and putting yourself out there from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And Carlos, thanks for everything you're doing to advocate and for your dad. But it's a team effort, and we need people, we need the community, and we need to fight for funding and for the advocacy, and we are going to put this in the rearview mirror. I believe that too.
Well said. Such an important discussion, and we just want to thank all of our guests, our doctors, for joining us and just sharing these stories of hope. And if you enjoyed our program, Choices, Hope, and Science, I invite you to join the conversation every morning at 8 a.m. on Facebook and on YouTube as we live stream patient stories along with the specialists saving lives. Join me for the morning medical update. Thanks again for watching.
Coming up on the next Choices, Hope, and Science.
So much pain. I couldn't do anything. And that was one of the ways that we found out.
For me, this was this really compelling collision of science and emotion.
I'm telling you, it's the darkest place I've been, probably in my life. I needed somebody to confirm that I was going to live. I've got too much to live for.
Someone you love will live because of this cancer center.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sarah Hahn, Vice President of Neurosciences at the University of Kansas Health System. We have the largest and most subspecialized neurosciences care team in the region. Our program provides proactive care to help patients attain and maintain brain health. To learn more about our neurological care program, visit kansashealthsystem.com/neuro.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.